Welcome to Celestial Insights, a weekly podcast that brings the stars down to earth. I'm your host, astrologer, coach, and intuitive Celeste Brooks. My purpose is to provide practical, unique, and insightful guidance to help you navigate the energies of the week like a boss. Hello, this is Celeste of Astrology by Celeste, and on this episode, I will discuss the astrology for the week of December 15th, 2024. First, let's take a look back at some astrology in action. Last week, the big transit was Mars stationed retrograde at 6 degrees of Leo. On December 7th, Neptune stationed direct on the day that the Sun, which spotlights things in Sagittarius, was opposite Jupiter in Gemini. One of the biggest stories was that the Syrian rebels who overtook Aleppo the week prior on December 7th and overthrew the Assad regime that had been in power for quite a long time. Mars rules war as well as our actions, and when it's retrograde, a planet is afflicted. The Syrian regime was unable to mount a successful defense. One of their biggest allies, Hezbollah, has been involved in its own problems where most of their leadership were taken out by Israel. And then Iran is having their own problems with Israel. And so Syria and Russia, their other ally, is so involved in the war in Ukraine, their allies were unable to come to support them because of their own problems. And on this day, Venus, which rules allies, met Pluto, which blocks, obscures things, and suggests like the death of these alliances was unable to help the Assad regime stop the rebels from overtaking them. And Sun opposite Jupiter. Jupiter rules celebrations. So the people were in the streets celebrating because the leader, which is a Sun-type figure, had been taken out. And Neptune dissolves and escapes. So Neptune dissolves. The regime is gone. Assad escaped, unfortunately. He was able to get out and get to Russia. And Russia is giving him asylum. But the stories coming out about the brutality of the regime, which we've known that he gassed his own people and all of these other things. And the day after, where there was that fourth quarter moon in Pisces that was near Saturn in Pisces. Saturn rules prisons and the moon, the people. So at the first quarter moon, the moon was moving to conjunct Saturn. And the people of Syria went to this prison, which is horror stories are coming out of what happened in this prison. And there were not just adults, but children being held captive in this prison. Thousands of people were freed and coming out into the streets, and people were reuniting with their families. And so that was one of the biggest stories we saw with the Mars retrograde on a global scale. Another story that caught my eye was related to the Sabian symbols. And so you can go and listen to last week's episode called Information Dumps if you want to learn more. At the first quarter moon, the Sun Sabian symbol was tiny children playing in sunbonnets, frolicking at the beach. And for the moon was, in a huge tent, a famous revivalist conducts meetings with a spectacular performance. And I said there may be a big speech about protecting children or someone preaching. And the Pope had his mass, and they were doing something where there was this reenactment of Jesus being born in the manger, and the baby was lying on a kafeye, which is that Palestinian cloth that is often used to protect people from the sun. The Pope talked about how urgently it was needed for there to be a ceasefire, and the imagery of seeing the child on this cloth was incredibly striking and powerful coming from the Pope. And Neptune rules images and photographs like this. It was just iconic. He also talked about how the United States should release all the prisoners off of death row, and again bring in this theme of the moon conjunct Saturn in Pisces. So this Sabian symbol, both of them showed up exactly in line with what happened to the day of the first quarter moon. So that one just blew my mind. They always show up in some kind of way, but this one was really incredible. For both Syria and the United States, Mars retrograde stationed in the 8th house. And for Syria, it's stationed on their Pluto, which rules war. For the U.S., on the North Node, which is an amplifier and is associated with groups and organizations. So I'm going to read from Deborah Holding's book, The Houses, Temples of the Sky. It's on my Amazon storefront. If you buy it from there, I get a few pennies. There's a link in the show notes. In mundane astrology, the 8th house is associated with the national debt, the collector of taxes, danger to the people through war or natural disasters, financial relations with foreign countries, public mortality, the death rate. Raphael notes, for example, that Mars in the 8th house shows many sudden and terrible deaths by fire, accidents, and crime. It denotes death of military, naval, and medicinal men, notable people in the iron or steel industry, and those connected with trades to do to fire. For the USA, some big events. On the day Mars stationed retrograde, there was an earthquake in Northern California, 7.0, which is really big, and it triggered a tsunami warning. Now, the warning was called off because a tsunami did not come in, but people were evacuating up and down the coast of California or getting away from the water. So you can think about the Neptune direct. So Mars retrograde on the North Node in the 8th house. And in the chart of the United States, Mars rules the land because we have Aries on the IC of real estate, land, and the rebel party. So we can see this multiple ways that there would be some kind of natural disaster. There were also really bad storms on the East Coast. And a couple of days later, Mars is still, as I'm recording this now, on the 10th of December, Mars is still on the North Node. It moves very slowly. It takes a while for a retrograde planet to pick up speed after it comes to what appears from our perspective on Earth to a stop in the zodiac, and it stays there. It's like a branding iron. And now there was this fire that broke out in Malibu, California, and students at Pepperdine University are sheltering in place, but thousands of people have been evacuated. I'm very concerned about these students with us having a full moon in Gemini this week. I'll talk a bit more about that later. And with the war going on in Syria, the United States has something like 900 troops there, and there were military actions against ISIS troops over there. So hopefully the United States is not going to be dragged further into this conflict, which is causing unimaginable suffering for people over in the Middle East, and that whoever took over Syria, and there's some concerns about, the nature of the groups that are going to be in control. But wouldn't it be incredible if they set up a democratic type system rather than dictatorship? The other big story is that a young man named Luigi Mangione assassinated the CEO of United Healthcare in broad daylight on the streets of New York City on December 4th, 2 days before Mars went retrograde. And Mars transits often come in early, a couple days early, whereas Saturn and Uranus are often happen to the day. The fascinating thing about this is that I see it as a Pluto and Aquarius event where we're looking at power to the people, shadows of groupthink coming to light, the people rising up against the elites. On the internet, there were so many people sharing supportive statements about Luigi and the fact that he murdered the CEO. It opened this big conversation about how heinous healthcare companies in the United States are, where they're constantly turning down people for procedures or denying claims. People are calling him the claims adjuster, the assessor, and John Wick were some of the things people described him as before he was identified and captured. And I posted on Instagram as soon as I heard this and started seeing the reaction that he was going to be an anti-hero, and likely his trial, which will take place with Saturn and Neptune in Aries, people were going to be riveted around this, and he would be a romanticized Neptune hero, Aries, but Saturn, who did something really bad. That's what I predicted as soon as I saw what happened. And yes, they got him alive. And there's a lot of shock and dismay among elites, among cable news hosts, politicians, and other CEOs, and articles are being written about the shock about how that the common folk are celebrating the murder of the CEO and romanticizing the killer, who actually has a nice smile and is handsome. And so Mars retrograde, he murdered this man, Neptune direct. He's a romanticized hero. I'll talk more about the details when I get into some of the transits, but this event, I think, could be the start of the American version of the French Revolution, where the people are rising up and uniting against the capitalist class that has abused and pushed down the common people and really has destroyed in a lot of ways the middle class, where people cannot get ahead. The number of people who are a $400 bill away from bankruptcy is shocking in the United States. The number of people who are denied medical treatments due to these healthcare companies is also shocking. So there's been a lot of talk about death rates, the public deaths, based on the actions of these insurance companies, which is related to the 8th house, as well as corporate greed and the debt that people have. If someone has a big health problem, there's sometimes people who cannot get out of debt for years or their entire lifetime. So it's bringing up a really important conversation under a new moon. The new moon in Sagittarius was square Saturn in Pisces. Pisces rules the ill and infirm and hospitals, and Saturn rejects and excludes. Many of these healthcare companies reject and exclude people from being able to get the treatments they need to save money and enrich the shareholders. It turns out Luigi had a back problem that he had back surgery for, and the surgery was not successful, and he was in excruciating pain. Leo rules the low back, so Mars retrograde in Leo. Mars motivates. He murdered the head of United Healthcare because of excruciating low back pain, where obviously he was not pleased with whatever went on with the healthcare company. On the same day, another healthcare company announced, I think it was Blue Cross Anthem or something like that, announced that they were going to stop paying for anesthesia after a certain time period. So if someone was getting surgery and there was an anesthesiologist, they would have a time limit in order to be able to deliver anesthesia that would be covered during surgeries. People went ballistic and they reversed the decision. Mercury and Mars were both retrograde. Well, Mars was about to go retrograde, but Mercury was retrograde. Retrogrades rule reversals, and they reversed the decision, Mercury, related to surgeries, Mars, and anesthesia, Neptune going direct. So that whole story was also part of this Mars retrograde. Your cosmic advantage begins with the Wise Skies digital calendar. With descriptions for every planetary and lunar event, all levels of astrology enthusiasts can enjoy the calendar on any device and now in many languages. With this superpower in your back pocket, you will be fully equipped to understand the astrological weather any day of the week. My good friend and collaborator, Tiffany Herlick, creates this calendar every year, and I use it daily. I highly recommend it. Use my coupon code for $10 off. The code is ABC2024 or ABC2025, depending on the year. Let the universe have your back with the Wise Skies digital astrology calendar. The theme of this week is 2 truths and a lie, and there are 3 big things I want you to think about as we navigate this week. The first is that we're having a full moon at 23 degrees of Gemini today. Full moons are the culmination of the cycle where the sun and the moon are as far apart as they can be, giving full illumination. The sun emits the light and the moon reflects it back. The sun rules the leaders, the one, the star of the show, and the moon rules the people. The sun is in Sagittarius, a mutable fire sign. It's a bestial sign. It's animalistic. Its glyph is the horse, half man, half horse. And one of the parts of the mythology about Luigi is that part of the reason they saw his face is because he stopped, and the news is saying, to flirt with someone at the desk of the hostel, and pulled his mask down and smiled at her. So that is how they got the glimpse at his face. And Gemini is an air sign. Air communicates, air connects. It's humane. Do you choose the man or the bear? If you watch any of the Sunday shows, really think about how they're using Sagittarius and Gemini words to describe any of the stories. But there will be talk about the dichotomy about Luigi, about he came from this wealthy family, he got this great education, he's so smart, he wrote an manifesto, he was very philosophical, and how, this injury, the full moon is squaring Neptune, caused this physical weakness for him. Moon phase family of this cycle began on June 17th, 2023, where the sun and the moon were both at 26 degrees of Gemini. The first quarter moon, where there may have been a pivot point or adjustment, was on March 16th, 2024, where the sun was in Pisces and the moon in Gemini, both at 27 degrees. The full moon today, sun in Sagittarius, moon in Gemini, both at 23 degrees. All is illuminated. And the last quarter moon, where there'll be some lessons learned, will be sun in Virgo, moon in Gemini, September 14th, 2025, both at 21 degrees of the respective signs. It will be interesting if we learn about the timeline of what was going on in Luigi's life, if any of these dates correspond with things related to his health issues or his planning around the murder. He has a moon in Virgo. We don't know his birth time, but we have his birth date. He has a moon in Virgo. At noon, the moon was at 21 degrees of Virgo on the day he was born. So especially if he was born later in the day, this cycle could be very intimately related to his natal chart and be illuminating about this story. This full moon is intimately related to the United States because we are a Sagittarius rising. So the sun is shining in our first house of the people. What will be illuminated to the people of the United States about seventh house topics, because that's where the full moon will be, and it's conjunct our natal Mars in Gemini. So related to problems or conflict related to seventh house topics. Seventh house is our friends, our allies, but it's also our open enemies. So I wonder if something will be coming to light about the Chinese hack. And I think, I didn't mention that. That's another big story about Mars retrograde, is that it came to light. It was announced the day before, I think it was the day before Mars went retrograde, that Chinese hackers this summer infiltrated 8 telecom companies and were able to steal the text messages, voicemails, and call records from millions of Americans. Likely they were looking for political candidates and politicians' data, but they've got stuff from millions of Americans. So we got a warning about we need to make sure we're using encrypted apps always to protect our data and information. So that's part of why it's called truth and a lie. What truths will come to light and what lies will be revealed with this full moon. It could be some really big, shocking news could be coming forward. The sun is at 23 degrees of Sagittarius. The tarot card correspondence is the 10 of Wands. I like to call that the putting down your burdens card. That's where it looks like a man has like the 10 wands on his shoulders and he's having trouble standing up. And it's like you're near completion, but exhausted. It's like put down your burdens. The Sabian symbol is a blue bird perched on the gate of a cottage. It's the symbol of good fortune, calmness, and rewards, promise of happiness. So after the work is done, you can get some rewards. Birds are messengers. What news is coming to light? The moon is at 23 Gemini, which is the 10 of swords, which is someone on the ground with 10 swords in their back. It's the backstabbing betrayal card. Carefree children skating on ice is the Sabian symbol. It can be about overcoming or ignoring dangers and difficulties. Triumph over empathy is something Dane Rudyard talked about with this Sabian symbol. So it'll be really interesting to see how these two come together with like children doing something a little difficult, but there's good fortune involved. The next thing I want to make you aware of is that Mercury will station direct at 6 Sagittarius on the day of the full moon. So that gives this extra emphasis to the energy of the moon. This makes me very concerned about any fires, because as hopefully this fire that's going on in Malibu will be all out as soon as possible, but hopefully before the full moon. Because when Mercury, which rules wind in a fire sign, Sagittarius, changes directions, so the energy is intensified 5 days and before and after a planet stations. So this symbolically can be like the winds picking up and blowing a different way, which would be very dangerous for the firefighters and the students if they're still trapped in the college campus, Pepperdine. Let's hope that's not a story that we're hearing about, because Gemini rules students, Sagittarius rules universities. Mercury went retrograde on November 25th. So you can look back and see, whatever happened in that period, even a couple of weeks before Mercury went retrograde. There may be a story that has 3 acts where Mercury traveled past the point it's going to travel past 6 Sagittarius. It went on and went retrograde at, it was 21 or 22 Sagittarius, I can't remember, on November 25th, and went back. Now it's going direct at 6 Sagittarius. It'll pass in January. It'll pass that 22 degrees again. So there can be a 3-part story that you're revisiting a story. And one of the aspects I've been so interested about was to see how Mercury and Jupiter being in opposition in each other's signs of their home signs was going to show up. So Mercury in Sagittarius opposite Jupiter in Gemini. They're both in their detriment, where they can go to extremes and be ineffective because they're weakened. Detriment is a debility, but they're in the signs of each other's homes. Mercury's at home in Gemini, Jupiter's at home as Sagittarius. So they can offer each other mutual aid, even though oppositions are really far from each other. And I've been wondering what kind of stories would be related to this. Last week, I talked about that woman who snuck on the plane to France and then was sent back. This is related to Luigi's story. On November 18th, to the day when Mercury in Sagittarius direct was opposite Jupiter retrograde, Luigi's mother called the police in order to report her son missing. On that day, the word of the day for the Celestial Insights podcast was stalker. And I thought that was such a strange thing for me to be writing down. And Luigi stalked the CEO, Brian Thompson. That week's podcast was called The Pickup Artist. And he was flirting with that woman, and that's how he got caught. On that day, November 18th, the moon was in Cancer. Cancer rules mothers. And the sun was trine Neptune. Neptune rules the missing. His mother called the police for help in order to find her missing child. Astrology is literal and a language. On December 4th, the day Mercury retrograde was opposite Jupiter retrograde, so the second pass was the day that Luigi killed the CEO. The word of the day was who, and this day the sun in Sagittarius was square Saturn in Pisces. So literal. A CEO, a leader sun figure was killed, Saturn. Saturn's a grim reaper, and Venus in Capricorn was sextile Neptune in Pisces. Him pulling down his mask to smile at the hostile worker was how led to his identity. Neptune disguises, and He was wearing a disguise, but he pulled it down momentarily. And it allowed us to find out who he was. And there was a manhunt for several days where nobody knew his name. The next one with Mercury direct, Jupiter will still be retrograde, is December 26th. So we'll see if we hear another thing about this story on that date. If there's news released, it's right after Christmas, so it may be a little delayed. It may not be to the date, but this is an example, as you can see, a story having multiple acts when you have these retrogrades leading to planets talking 3 times. Just be mindful the week of the full moon with Mercury stationing direct, Mars retrograde. One of the things we're going to be hearing about, and you may be hearing on the Sunday news shows if you listen to them or any kind of podcast, is about the rage of the people against the system. Retrogrades pull back the tape so we can see what's underneath. Mercury retrograde and then Mars retrograde, people were talking about how angry, Mars rules anger, they were about what's going on with the healthcare companies and the abuses of healthcare companies. I call it the sound of their fury that is bursting out into the open. And many are surprised by how angry and how gleeful so many people are about the demise of this corporate elite. So this week, still keep in mind we need to be extra double checking our communications and slowing down as Mercury starts to pick up speed. If you're traveling, leave the house early because there could be unexpected delays. If you're at the airport, your flight may be delayed because there's wind or other weather issues. If not you, you'll probably be seeing it on the news, something related to travel, transportation, communication. Hopefully no sites are going down or things like that on this day, or commerce. There could be like big commerce problems. Those are topics that Mercury rules. The last thing I want to make you aware of is that Capricorn season begins on Friday, December 21st until January 19th. The day the sun enters Capricorn is called the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere. And solstice, it looks like the sun stands still for 3 days as it turns to move northward. So it's the shortest day and the longest night, and so the light returns. So you can think about that image of turning back on the light, slowly pushing it up. Now, the moon is opposite Saturn and Pisces on this day, so the Virgo moon opposite Saturn and Pisces. So there could be some news about the elderly Capricorn and health concerns Virgo that lead to weakness Saturn. So pay attention to what we hear. Capricorn rules big businesses, the elderly, governments. These are some of the topics. It's a great time to get practical and focused on your long-term goals. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. And Saturn brings earned success with extended efforts. So this is a time we turn ourselves to, what do we want to accomplish next year? Are we going to make some plans? The Capricorn New Moon workshop is on December 29th. I've decided I'm going to take a break from these workshops. I've got so much on my plate. I just cannot handle it all. I'm scaling down. This is what I'm using the Mars retrograde for. I'm taking some things off my plate and I'm reconsidering how I want to move forward with my business in a more sustainable way. I have an Aries midheaven, so this Mars retrograde is a perfect opportunity for me to step back, take a breath, and unload some of my burdens. That 10 of Wands, I have been feeling that energy and it's just too much. So the workshops are going away, but I'm going to be teaching astrology foundations again next year, as well as I'm going to be introducing some new things. I'm not sure exactly what. Of course, the podcast will remain, and you can come for a reading or a coaching program. I love working with people on a more consistent basis because you can really make some big changes and have some real understanding of working with your chart and watching as things come to light over time. Capricorn rules duties and responsibilities. So these may be topics that you start focusing on as the sun enters this sign. If you are embarking on a new journey, experiencing a major life event, feeling stuck, trying to make a difficult decision, or just looking to make positive changes, astrology can provide life-changing insights. There are several ways to work with me. You can come for a 60 or 90-minute astrology consultation depending on your needs. Engage in longer-term cosmic success coaching where we work together on a 3-month basis to help you overcome blocks, improve your life satisfaction, build better relationships, accomplish your career goals, and understand yourself better using the tool of astrology. Or mystic mentoring if you're an aspiring astrologer and want help with chart analysis techniques. Go to astrologybyceleste.com to check out my offerings. If you have any questions, you can email me at celeste@astrologybyceleste.com. On Sunday, the word of the day is spotlight. We have the full moon at 23 Gemini at 1:01 a.m. Pacific time. Now, on this day, the Sagittarius sun is quincunx Uranus in Taurus, both at 24 degrees. Uranus rules shocks and awe. Taurus is an earth sign, and quincunxes move us into new situations where we have to release and let go of something. So the sun is a leader, so obviously the news in the U.S. is going to be talking about the healthcare CEO being murdered, as well as perhaps Assad being forced to leave Russia. What other topics are we talking about in terms of a leader and something Uranian, something shocking and a sudden break? Uranus rules abortions, elections, outer space, scientific advancements. Cryptocurrency is a Uranus and Taurus topic, so it'll be interesting what's on the news. The moon enters the sign of Cancer at 12:21 p.m. Pacific time, where it's at home. Cancer is a sign of home, family, and foundations, specifically mothers. It rules we're talking about fertility with this moon in Cancer. Also water. There could be stories about how storms are impacting travel because Mercury stations direct at 12:56 p.m. Pacific time at 6 degrees of Sagittarius. And then the moon is squaring the nodes, North Node in Aries, South Node in Libra. So there can be talk about a lack of diplomacy and an amplification of conflict. So really notice what is being spotlighted on this day. Maybe you read in the news about them the police looking for a suspect with a big spotlight. On Monday, the word of the day is EYESORE. The Cancer moon squares Chiron and Aries, both at 19 degrees. Aries rules the eyes and Chiron wounds. So notice what you see that is an eyesore. Are your eyes sore? Do you need to moisturize your eyes? That can be some things we're thinking about that may cross your mind. On Tuesday, the word of the day is crown. We have a Leo moon starting at 3:38 p.m. Pacific time. Leo is fixed fire. This energy is proud. It can be arrogant. It also can be joyful, and I love a Leo moon in general. People are more living out loud. You see more red. You'll see people exaggerating their movements more. Now, this Leo moon, the first thing it does is oppose Pluto in Aquarius. So there can be some kind of power struggle between a Leo type figure, which is a leader, royalty. That's why the word of the day is crown. And the people, Aquarius, the group, the organization. On Wednesday, the word of the day is passionate. The moon meets Mars retrograde. People can be feeling very energized, very angry because Mars is retrograde, talking excitedly. On this day, the sun in Sagittarius is square Neptune in Pisces, both at 27 degrees. Somebody may be at their company talking about how their boss didn't do something they were supposed to do. Neptune, it wasn't done. Or you're looking for the boss. Where's the boss? Nobody can find them. On this day, there's a disseminating moon at 12 degrees of Leo. This is the first phase after the full moon. It's a great time to share what you know. And with this, I can see someone telling a group of people, the moon rules the people, Mars retrograde, how they worked really hard against retrograde's delay, obstacles that kept pushing them back and slowing down, but they persevered and they achieved the success. Feels like very Leonic, and they're proud of what they achieved. Or they could be talking and they're very arrogant about what they achieved. Proud, arrogant, leadership, these are all words associated with Leo. On Thursday, the word of the day is freedom. Venus in Aquarius is trine Jupiter retrograde in Gemini, both at 14 degrees. Venus trine Jupiter, they are the benefics. This is beautiful energy. This is a lot could be done in groups or with other people, or even just a one-on-one relationship. You can grow together. Venus and Jupiter, the benefics, they bring blessings, abundance. Jupiter invests in. It's about luck and opportunity. Aquarius and Gemini are both air signs. Air signs are humane. They're involving people. If you need any help whatsoever, just ask for it and you may get it. Notice if you're hearing stories about people being freed. Jupiter has associations with freedom from a difficult situation. The moon in Virgo begins at 11:36 p.m. Pacific time. Virgo is the chop wood, carry water moon of the zodiac. It's a great time to get focused and practical and thinking about health. So, someone's freed from a difficult situation, and like maybe someone's rescued from a bank heist and they've got a scraped knee, so they need medical care. That could be the Virgo moon. Virgo's associated with health. On Friday, the word of the day is sprint. So maybe you're going for a jog and you realize, I'm not running as fast as I normally do. The moon in Virgo, which Virgo is about like accountability, it's precise, is square Mercury and Sagittarius, but Mercury's not moving very fast because it just turned direct. Now, Sprint in the US is a cell phone service, so the moon square Mercury could be like people are having trouble communicating or making calls. This is also the day that 29 degrees of Sagittarius, people may be moving around really, really fast as this mutable fire, trying to get all the energy out before the sun changes signs. On Saturday, the word of the day is standstill. Capricorn season begins at 1:20 p.m. What are we looking at? What are we focused on related to Capricorn themes? If something grabs your attention, stop. Think about, what does this have to do with? Is this about Capricorn season? It takes a few days to get used to the energy. And one of the things, Capricorn can be a little pessimistic. If you felt joyful on Friday and you wake up feeling a little grumpy and you're like, why am I so grumpy? It may be just the energetic shift from Sagittarius to Capricorn. Or you could call your grandma or get a call for your grandma, or you wake up and you had a dream about your grandpa. You can think about Capricorn rules legacy or elders. Just notice. You learn astrology through observation. So that's it for this week's episode. Feel free to email me at celeste@astrologybyceleste.com with any astrology and action stories, or let me know how the daily themes are playing out for you. Take care, and I'll catch you next week. Thank you for listening to Celestial Insights. To learn more about my work, please visit my website, astrologybyceleste.com, where I offer personal readings, horary consultations, cosmic coaching, group events, and classes to help guide people to higher levels of fulfillment. You can also find me on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and Facebook at Astrology by Celeste. If you enjoyed Celestial Insights, please help others find the show. Follow, rate it 5 stars, or write a nice review. I would so appreciate it. I'm astrologer, coach, and intuitive Celeste Brooks, and I'll be back next week.